Hey, what's up, everyone? Scott here with the Entrepreneur, and today is Wednesday, the 22nd, I believe. And I was thinking about starting a new format that I want to throw at anyone who's going to chime in and whatnot down the road. But I was thinking about doing something on a daily basis or on a semi-daily basis. Or once every 2 days, where I'm basically just going to run through some of the things that I learned this week, some of the things that I read that day, some of the things that I saw that day, yada yada yada. So basically, a daily dose of what have I been up to, and what have I found interesting, and give you some of my thoughts on it, and just kind of get the dialogue started and hopefully put out some interesting content and get some interesting discussions going and get some of your feedback and get some of your comments and your insights and just kind of have fun with it that way. So there were a couple of different things that I kind of went over today or came across today I thought were interesting. As some of you may have seen a previous video, which is my first video in over a year, was that I now work full time as a software engineer, so that kind of takes up a good 9 hours of my day. So I kind of wake up in the morning, 7:30 ish, get to work at 8:30, and then basically I'm programming for most of the day, and then I tend to come home and I take my bits and times and here and during lunch break and stuff, and I read articles, and I generally always have a book with me, so I'm reading on the bus in the morning. Either I'm reading that book. If I don't feel like reading that particular book, I'm usually either on Medium, or I'm trying to pick up on a couple of news articles. Sometimes when I'm brain dead on the way home, I'll usually just watch either quick YouTube documentaries, news, or something like John Oliver or Stephen Colbert to just kind of get some giggles going if work was boring that day. But yeah, so I'm kind of really have absolutely no idea how I'm going to go with this format. If I want to take it a little bit more techie, a little bit more development focused, or if I just kind of want to talk about general concepts, general news, general stories that are kind of floating out there. But one of the things that I think would be fun to start off with today, since it's been in the news so much, is Tesla and what's going on with Elon Musk, and that whole Azalea Bank story aside, where supposedly his girlfriend, an artist by the name of Grimes, had friends over, and one of them was someone by the name of Azalea Banks, a female artist. She had overheard some stuff about how Elon Musk was scrambling, yada yada, and that whole thing is kind of really noise in my eyes. When it comes to assessing, Tesla and what Elon Musk is doing there, I really try to kind of put my finance hat on and really look at how does this damage the company operationally, what's going on, really. With the production, with profit margins, etc. And I think there, like, the story remains like that they're now getting to a point where Model 3s are being produced at a fast enough rate, and they're getting to a point where economies of scale are working in their favor. Where according to them, they should be reaching at least operational profitability by the third quarter. So that's really exciting for a company that's basically just been like burning cash for years and years and years. I mean, this it's pretty insane, the fact that this company has such a high valuation at around $50 billion for a company that like barely produces like any vehicles. And so there's a lot that's banked in the stock, in terms of what it needs to do in order to get there. And I'm a big Tesla bull, and I love Elon Musk. He's to me one of the most inspiring individuals out there, and of course of my generation. I've watched all the documentaries on him that I can find, read his biography, and read all his articles. I really try to keep on tabs with it, which is kind of why I find like some of the recent stuff like very troubling. Because I hate him getting caught up in a bunch of bullshit that's character based and whatnot. And when it's like this is all, in my opinion, way below him. Like he his focus should be on really driving the technology forward and doing what he does best. And so it was unfortunate with how he handled the whole tweet situation. He put out a tweet saying that he was thinking about taking Tesla private at $420 a share. The stock's currently, or at the time, was trading in like the mid to low 300s, and of course rallied and then kind of came back down, and now hovers in around 300. And from an SEC standpoint, it's like, okay, well, what happened here? Like, this is very unusual for a CEO of a company to make a statement about the future of the company, especially in such a grand statement via social media platform. And especially that last part of the text message saying funding was secured was extremely troublesome, because in order to make such a statement and affect the stock, like, you really have to have solid footing. And based on what we're hearing now through the grapevine, is that SEC subpoenas have been issued, and so this is going to be very interesting to see how the SEC is going to handle this. And in my opinion, Elon Musk fucked up. Like, that's something where he, being as smart as he is, like, should have thought probably a little bit harder in terms of like what kind of an impact a tweet like that would have. But again, for someone who's like, I'm not in his shoes, so it's really hard for me to judge. Like, he's done so well over his career. I mean, the guy is an absolute genius and a visionary, and totally executes on things like few people in the world can and have. And so everybody's allowed to make mistakes. It sucks that it happened this way, but I'm sure there's going to be repercussions, and I can't really say anything against that, because that tweet just wasn't, in my opinion, just like, it just wasn't very smart. But anyways, there's a couple interesting articles that have been coming out, talking about what scenarios of backlash could look like, and yada yada. And then Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley have both dropped their coverage, which in the banking world generally means you have research departments that write research about these particular stocks. And usually when coverage is dropped on a specific stock, that means that that the investment banking side of that bank is helping that company perform some sort of service. And in this case, it seems like, okay, what can we deduct from that? Okay, it looks like Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, maybe a couple other banks, maybe in sort of deeper talks with Tesla about how to structure this deal, and putting together financial statements and putting together proposals and pitch decks and whatever. Or maybe there's investors already, and things are further along than most people think. But I think at this point, based on everything we've seen, there doesn't seem to be a solid plan in place, especially because of the announcement by the Saudi Arabian government that they were actually thinking about pushing in $1 billion into Lucid, which is a competitor to Tesla. Although that doesn't really, I find that not very worrisome, because Lucid hasn't even produced a functional car to the best of my knowledge. I mean, they have a prototype, but like $1 billion seems like a lot of cash, but in the auto world is not. Just look at how much money Tesla has burned. So even if the Saudi government puts $1 billion towards a competitor, I don't think that threatens Tesla in any way, because in order to be another Tesla or beat Tesla to what they're doing as a company that's not already established, like a GM or Ford or yada yada, you really have to execute, and you're gonna need way more money than $1 billion. So anyway, so that was that. Then Marquise Brownlee, who I am a huge fan of, he actually had a chance to sit down with Elon Musk and put out a 2-part video series. One where he's talking, it's this guy right here, where he's talking with Elon Musk just about what's currently going on, but then also did a cool little factory tour where Elon Musk basically is just showing him around, and I thought it was really cool, and gives viewers a really cool glimpse into what's going on at and how their facilities are structured, which it's super impressive to me. On another note, today I on the way to work, and then on my lunch break, and then after work, I was able to listen to episode 333 of the Tim Ferriss Show. And if you guys and girls don't know Tim Ferriss, haven't read his books, or are not listening to his podcast, you're fucking missing out, because I've been a huge Tim Ferriss fan for years now and consume his content religiously, and not just in part because of who he is, but also the type of people he brings on the shows and the type of background that they bring with them. And so this episode was one of his good friends, Kevin Rose, who's a serial entrepreneur, started a site called Dig back in 2004 that became really successful, and has been a venture capitalist ever since. Probably botching that resume a little bit, but super cool talk, and you can kind of scroll down here and see what they were talking about. And so a lot of the talk was about health, diet, fasting. It's types of intermittent fasting, ketosis, which is something that Tim Ferriss always likes to talk about. Talked about books that they were reading and how to improve your learning. So here you can see Pomodoro technique, very very famous technique on how to improve your knowledge consumption. So if you're interested, definitely check this out and give it a listen. It's about an hour and a half long, but totally worth it. Then currently the book I'm reading is by Walter Isaacson. It's called The Innovators. It's pretty cheap. I actually got it. I think I got it for $6 or $7. Sometimes Amazon does this weird thing where prices like either skyrocket or fall, and then you come back the next day and prices are completely out of line. Obviously, they have an algorithm that does all this. Oh, I almost said who. So things can get wacky, but and I don't know, in case you don't know anything about Walter Isaacson, but he wrote the Steve Jobs biography. He wrote a biography about Benjamin Franklin, Albert Einstein, Da Vinci, and also a book called The Innovators. And this is really, as he says in the preface, it was kind of really a book that was 10 years in the making, and it talks about sort of the invention of tech, all the players since like the 18th, 19th century, all the way up, and how tech sort of evolved. So it's both about the internet just as much as it is about technology, and he really kind of gives an interesting background to it. And if you haven't read anything about Walter Isaacson, I mean, talk about impressive people. He's actually on one of Tim Ferriss's podcast episodes, and I highly recommend you checking that out too. But it's unbelievable, like how many just stunning novels or biographies this guy's put out. Like the amount of research that goes in is just absolutely unbelievable. This is an example of someone who's born to do this, and I have so much respect for Walter Isaacson. Like some real technical people have given him sort of negative feedback for, hey, like you're not entirely accurate and whatnot. And it's like, dude, like give the guy a break. Like he's written so many amazing books, and they've been like largely extremely accurate. And not only that, but he also conveys like very dense information, historical information, in a way where it's really fun to digest. So I'm a huge fan. So check him out. Then right before this, I actually read this book called Rise of the Robots by Martin Ford. And this kind of, it was a really, really good book, to get me wrong. It felt a little bit generic in a sense that like it was kind of what you expect. Like okay, Rise of the Robots, okay, technology and the threat of jobless future, and like you get exactly what the cover tells you. Like the book was like very, very straightforward in terms of like, okay, here are the different areas, from blue collar workers to white collar workers and beyond. Sort of like what's the path of disruption look like, and the reason why I say it's generic, which is probably not fair to Martin Ford in his book, is just because like I love reading about this stuff, and like I feel like I'm so deep into that content, and I've read several books that were just like it. So therefore, like to me, it wasn't like really anything like novel or anything new. If this interests you, if you already read it and you're looking for something similar, I really enjoyed Bold by Peter Diamandis. That was another one that also talked about like different types of technologies that are going to be playing a huge part both today and in the future. So can only recommend that. But yeah, so that was my attempt at giving you a quick rundown of what's going on and what I'm reading, what I've been up to today. And I'll try to refine this because this was a little hacky, but we'll try and put the stuff out a little bit more frequently. And yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks so much. Have a good one.